Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast show is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Musali, the new president and CEO of Western Costume, welcoming Designing Hollywood back to Western. You're at the biggest costume house in the U.S., the oldest costume house in the U.S. We've been around over 112 years now. We consider ourselves the one-stop shop for all your costuming needs here. With our two extra buildings next door, we're at roughly around 150,000 square feet. There are roughly 2.5 million costumes. If you need to get supplies, we can help you with that. If you need fabric, we can help you with that. Order fabric from around the world, anywhere you need. Deck out a full army if you want in our military department. Here's our supply store, catering to all your costuming needs. Thank you, Designing Hollywood, for coming in to see Western Costume. Hope to see you soon.
Today's guest is an Emmy-nominated costume designer whose most recent credit includes Season 3 of FX's culinary dramedy series, The Bear, where she is currently nominated for her first Emmy Award and Costume Designers Guild Award for her contemporary designs in Season 2. Prior to becoming a costume designer, she graduated from Syracuse University with a degree in fashion design and soon began interning for several fashion designers and stylists after college. Although she's always had a passion for fashion and design, she quickly discovered she wanted her designs to tell a story and soon pivoted into the world of costume design itself. She got her start working as a costume intern on the 2012 drama What Maisie Knew, starring Julianne Moore and Alexander Skarsgård, and later worked her way up to assistant costume designer with credits including films like Searchlight's The Night House, I like that movie, and television series such as Netflix's Bloodline, which I also watched all of, and Dash and Lily, and HBO's High Maintenance and Betty. Her most recent film credit as head costume designer was for Sony's drama We Grown Now, for director Minhal Beg, which premiered at the 2023 Toronto Film Festival. Without further ado, it is our great pleasure to welcome costume designer Courtney Wheeler to the Designing Hollywood show. Courtney, it is so great to have you. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be here. What an intro.
Well, hey, you earned it. You earned it. You know, I think, as I was just telling you before we started recording, one of the most fascinating things for me, and I think a lot of the viewers, is to sort of hear a little bit about your journey. A lot of people told me they grew up making clothes for their dolls, or they were drawing, or they were doing things creating. Some people were painting, or some people's parents got them into it or something. But were you always interested in fashion design? Did you grow up interested in fashion design, and did that sort of send you into a certain educational path? How'd you get here?
I was pretty much always interested in fashion design and clothing. Besides the regular old, I would love to be a figure skater dream,
Did you have that? Was that a dream?
Very briefly,
Wow.
briefly. But I used to love watching the fashion shows on the public access channels in New York. I grew up in the suburbs outside the city in Westchester County. And I also used to love watching MTV's House of Style.
Oh, yeah.
And
Me too.
just great show. And I remember my grandmother on my father's side, Mama, she used to make me paper dolls that she used to hand draw herself and do the clothing herself. And I was just obsessed with them. I had an older cousin who was studying fashion design in high school because you could do that in city schools. And that's where it began. And then I think just after that, I used to try to take it all in. I used to buy magazines at Barnes and Noble, reading everything I could about it. Loved watching. I always had a love for film. My grandmother again, Mama would always have us watch Sound of Music, My Fair Lady, and those costumes, of course, are just,
Yeah.
they stick in your mind.
It's funny you say My Fair Lady. They recently remastered it in 4K, and it's absolutely stunning. I mean, you can see every thread, and those costumes are amazing, amazing.
It's just something that has always stuck with me. I started taking classes in high school on Saturdays and during the summer at FIT. And then I also got my first internship at 16 with Tommy Hilfiger. I ran into him in my local mall and introduced myself.
Wow.
And I remember just being like, hi, I'm a big fan of your work. I'm interested in fashion design. He asked me if I watched his daughter's show, because at the time she had a reality show on MTV. And I was just like, yeah, you know, I'm very intrigued about this world. And he's like, well, you should come intern for me. And I was like, oh, I'm only 16. He's like, that's okay. He's like, here, take my card, call my assistant, tell her you met me. And I started that summer at Tommy Hilfiger.
Okay, that's an amazing story. I'll save it, but I have a Tommy Hilfiger story, and that sounds just like what he was like when I met him. Like, he's just a dude. You know, here, have a job.
Just a dude. Ran into him in a hip hop store in the mall, like a hip hop streetwear store in the mall, buying clothes for, I'm not sure who. I think he might have said one of his children, but he was just so friendly and welcoming, and he still remembered me. When my friend ran into him without me, he asked how my internship was going, and then when I ran into him again, he was like, how was it? Like, how is it? And so I will always remember his kindness and what an opportunity he gave me.
Okay, this is, I don't normally ask this kind of thing, but this is a great story. Now, you made that effort. You know, you had the courage and the wherewithal to walk up and obviously present yourself at 16. I got a lucky too at that age. But what do you think? Why do you think you were? So many people, I think, kids today might not have done something like that. What do you think that was instilled in you? Was it instilled in you by your grandmother? Was it instilled in you by your family that, you know, you had an opportunity, you went up, you didn't shy away from it, you took it? What do you think gave you that ability?
That's a really good question I never thought about. I think my family probably was always like, go say hi, go introduce yourself, go. I had no idea it would create an opportunity, but I thought it would be a missed opportunity not even to just acknowledge him and his work, in that what he did for streetwear and hip hop and music and film, and I was so into that I just had to say something.
Well, I think that's a really important lesson to impart to people, because if you know how to carry yourself and you're respectful and nice and you can approach people, you never know where that can lead to. And the entertainment business is full of moments like that can lead somewhere. And I think a lot of people don't, they say that you miss 100% of the shots you never take. So you took a shot at 16. That's really impressive. Congratulations on that one. Now, what did you learn in that internship? Was there something that you didn't know, or things that you'd picked up working for the Hilfiger organization?
I had no clue really before I started there, how things from concept to creation, how it was created.
Right.
And to me, it was just, my only knowledge was watching maybe what's the Parent Trap, and watching her sketch a wedding dress and then the photo shoot. I don't think I really understood the technical aspect of it,
right,
and what they were creating before. And it was a lot of, whether it was color swatching or whether it was little details about the stitching on jeans, and fabrication, and being like, this is what worked last season. What should we do this season? I had no clue that I thought, oh, every season everyone's coming up with has to come up with these new things, but they were just like, no, these are our best sellers, these are strong sellers. Like, how can we? I had not a clue until then.
Wow. So, I mean, and again, those insights are incredibly valuable, you know, and you never know when you're going to get them. So good on you. Where did you go then? Did you go to college? Like you said, you went into design and you went to different schools and different places, and you went to Syracuse?
I went to Syracuse University. I had the experience of going to Saturday Live at FIT, going to Summer Live. These are their programs for high school students, and I loved it and I learned a ton. But I also went to a very small magnet school in Westchester that was experimental. So by the time my senior year rolled around, I just wanted to have a traditional college experience because I hadn't experienced in years. And so I chose Syracuse University, and it was wonderful. One, because they really make sure that you're interning and that you're connecting with companies that you would like to work for. And I also never stopped. I would also take classes at FIT over the summers as well. And so I just kind of never stopped learning, or I for a while I felt like a professional intern because that's what I would do. And I would choose smaller companies after Tommy Hilfiger. Like, I worked for White and Warren, a cashmere company, and that was really cool to see. Everything took place on one floor, you know?
Right. Wow.
And they later actually helped me do my senior collection, because my senior collection was taking older fabrics and sweaters that they had no longer any use for, and I turned it into dresses or pants and reconstructed it and everything. And they were so kind as well.
Wow, that's great. So would you recommend, I mean, some people didn't have a traditional education. They weren't very rigorous academically, but other people were. And a lot of people tell me they studied art history or they studied design. They learned to sew. It sounded like you did a combination of all of those kinds of things.
Oh yeah, I learned to sew. You take your fine arts classes, which are very important. Also try to be interested in other things. Try to, whether it was drawing or painting or taking theater classes, just something to keep you creative outside of just fashion design, I really enjoyed. And I think just learning, even if you want to be in costume design or if you want to be a fashion designer, I do think it is important to just have a knowledge of just other aspects.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think general education, because you have to have inspiration comes from everywhere.
Yeah.
You never know. And you never know who you're going to meet or what you're going to learn and who's going to lead you whatever path you're going to go down. I mean, the more you know, it's funny. I think that nowadays general education for its own sake is something people kind of they take for granted. Like, the more you know, because we live in this information environment, but if you're not in a position where you're soaking it in. So that's really interesting. I mean, you have a great story. So you were studying fashion. Now, what happened to you after you got out of school and you went into the fashion business? What was that like? Was it what you hoped it would be, or?
I think when I got out of Syracuse, I wasn't quite sure. After a couple of internships, I wasn't quite sure if fashion design was exactly the right career choice for me, in terms of just how much I realized it wasn't necessarily, it was a lot of marketing towards something.
Right. Sure.
If that makes sense. It wasn't as, there were a lot more jobs available and a lot more jobs that's what you were kind of taught is to take over jobs that were a lot of, we've done these cargo shorts for 10 years. They keep working for us. We're just, you know,
Yeah.
change the color, you know, and
Not a lot of creative gratification there.
not a lot of creative gratification. And so I started interning at a company called Kate Ryan, and it was an agency for stylists and makeup artists and photographers. I interned there, and I was working in the agency, but I would also go help their roster of stylists when they needed an extra assistant. And from there, I got an internship with another stylist. And being on set was exciting, and I liked the constant movement. So I knew that I was close to finding what I wanted to do, but it still wasn't quite it. And I started to, I don't know what made me look at film. I knew it was a job, but I didn't know how to get there. Like, I
Right.
remember.
I was going to ask you, because this is the thing everybody wants to know, and I love this. You didn't know how to. So how'd you do it? What happened?
I remember at the time I believe at some point I had emailed the costume designer for True Blood just to tell her, I was like, I love this. I would love to work with you. No idea how or what. I was just like, well, what do I have to do? And she's like, find a.
So she wrote you back.
She did write me back.
That, I mean, again, taking those shots. You're taking the shots.
Yes.
Wow, that's impressive. How long from the time you wrote her, if you remember, how long from the time you wrote her did you hear back from her?
Oh, I think it was like within a week. Whatever
Wow.
it was, I'm not even sure how I found her email address. Just deep diving, and I remember she was like, "This is so great. Thank you for reaching out." You know, of course, she's on a different coast. She's in a different region, so she was just like, try to find a production assistant job in your area and keep doing that and just stay hungry. And, you know, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to find something. And I went on I say it's Craigslist, but it could very well have been one of those websites for the entertainment industry.
Sure.
But I found someone looking for an internship on an indie, and I sent my resume. Had no idea. Sent my resume. Sent my college portfolio, because again, no idea what they needed. I get.
Yeah, but you had all this stuff to send. You had a great bunch of stuff to send out. That's amazing.
Sure. Yes. And it's funny now because I'm just like, oh, I do not need your
Right.
like,
Just send me your Instagram.
I don't know. Yeah. And at the time, no Instagram, you know,
Right.
it's just not even a Facebook. And so, yeah, I got called in and I got the internship. Stacey Matat was amazing. She was a costume designer for it. And it was such a great learning experience.
So that was on What Maisie Knew.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a pretty prestigious first gig.
It listen, I was like, this was a great indie to learn on, like to be a part of. It was like,
Yeah. Not too difficult, but a
Marquee.
great cast and 2 directors. You know, there were 2 directors on that movie.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry for that. You can see
Hello.
yeah. It's luckily that's not on camera, but that's that software. I put your finger. But so now, when you got on set for What Maisie Knew, what was that like being on that set, and what did you learn when you got there?
Honestly, I think everything clicked into place because it was a lot of what I had already been learning, working with the stylist, you know, knowing that, like, being hungry and being able to be like, I want to learn everything. What do I have to do? I just kind of hopped in, and it felt like such a good, it felt like such a good fit. I was like, oh, I get to go outside and just run around the city, like dropping things off, picking things up, returning things, buying things. I was like, this is like, okay, great. It's like, I get to go to set, and I remember they did the one set they were filming in Central Park, like a little puppet scene at the theater, and I was like, this is like, I remember being amazed and very comfortable.
Yeah, look, I've told people I can't stress enough being a PA, because a lot of people are like, I want to be a producer. Well, being a PA is also very helpful, like you said, because you're doing all this stuff for all these people. Yeah. And I went to USC, I went to film school, and it was nothing like being on set. I started out as a PA too, and I think I learned more as a PA on the first day on a set than I'd learned in all of film school, because watching movies is very different than making them. Yeah. So,
and you're watching, it's a small crew, so watching the wardrobe supervisor work, bringing in the tailor, watching Stacy work, being in the fittings, and it was all so impressive, and you have to be a sponge. So it was so good to take that in for my first film. Yeah.
Well, your credits as then you moved through the industry are pretty impressive, because you went on to shows like Power. A friend of mine named Adam Huss was on that show for a while, and they played like Cantos or I forget his name.
Oh,
but yeah, I worked with him as an actor for a long time. He's the nicest guy in the world. Then you went to Bloodline. You worked on, and The Night House is a very cool film. You had a really great career, it seems, like a great trajectory as you worked your way up to The Bear, which is one of the hippest shows on TV. You worked on even like Queer as Folk, which is another show that had great costume design. Harlem was good, Betty. So as you're moving up through your career, what were your impressions of the business? How did it change as you went from an intern and your responsibilities got more and more and more on shows? What was that process like for you?
I feel like I'm a very nosy person when it comes to how things are made and how they happen. So each time I'm like, okay, what more can I do? Oh, I can do this. It's like, okay. So I get to, for being a coordinator and from being able to help with tracking the budget and making things go out make sure the PAs take it out on time and it comes in on time, coordinating the pickups and making sure that the assistant costume designer has what she needs. I think that each of those experiences, whether you're a PA, because as a PA, you're out and you're actually talking to the vendors and you're going to the studio services and there's a lot of FaceTime. And then from there, from a coordinator, you're working more with the production office. And so I think that each part just built a different appreciation for each level of where people were at and who you talk to in those positions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
And so, and as becoming an assistant costume designer and shopping at the same time, you're like, okay, this is more creative. This is thinking about the character, thinking about time and place and the space that they're in and the actors' bodies, and learning, but also learning from some really great costume designers was really amazing. And I will say, like, I've taken lessons from everyone I've worked with.
Yeah, 100%. Well, as you work your way through these great, you've got a great list of credits, and then you finally on We Grown Now, you transition to above the line. I mean, you're in the main credits now, as the costume designer. What was that transition like now that you're calling your own shots? I mean, were there differences, or was it just an extension of what you'd already been doing, or did you relish now that you had, I don't know if it's power so much, but now you're working directly with the director and the production designer and the cinematographer and all that. What was that transition like for you?
I will say, so my last few projects, I would say like 6 or 7 projects before I became a costume designer, was as an assistant costume designer to Christina Spiridakis, who is we call each other our creative partners because of how well we work together and how like simpatico we are in terms of how we would do the fittings together and how we would interact with the showrunners, the producers, and of course she's taking more of that on, but we always work in such a great unit that the transition to a costume designer was a little bit easier for me because I was with Christina doing that a lot of the times as well. And so she actually, I say like, she kind of kicked me out the nest because we were working on Queer as Folk together, but prior to that, we had shot the pilot for The Bear. And she was the costume designer on it. I was the assistant costume designer. We had a grand old time in Chicago because we shot the pilot in the middle of the summer. If you know anything about Chicago, like this summer is where it's at.
Yeah.
And so we thought for sure, we're like, oh, we'll go on to Queer as Folk. It shoots until like the winter time. There's no way that they're shooting in Chicago in the winter time. So we'll be okay. And so we were on Queer as Folk. We're in New Orleans, and we
all the great American cities. You're having a ball.
Oh, fantastic cities, and we get a call. I'm like, yeah, so got picked up. Starts in February. I'm like, oh, okay. We're in the middle of our season. Of the season, and we kept on actually adding time because everyone kept dropping like flies with COVID. So it would just push everything further. And so Christina is like, okay, you go ahead. I'm going to stay here. I'll finish the season and then I'll join you in Chicago. And she's like, you can do this. I trust you. Like, Chris will trust you. You're amazing. You got this. And I'm like, okay. And we love being together. So the fact that we had to separate, we're like, oh my gosh, really? So before I was supposed to go, she goes, Courtney, I'm probably not joining you, right? I was like, don't tell me that. She's like, I'm just saying. It's like, what might not happen, but we'll see. So I get to the Bear and everyone's like, okay, so you're here for how long? Christina will join you. We're like, yeah. I just completely ended up designing the entire first season outside of the pilot with, of course, her brilliant inspiration and guidance.
Well,
but yeah, that's it.
Okay, we got to go back. Because the Bear, I remember when the Bear first started and I'm what is this show about? And people are trying to, it's about a restaurant, and the guy of Shameless is in it. Like what? So, and then, you watch that show, you can't take your eyes off of it. And so tell me about when you first, like you did the pilot, what were your impressions of the Bear? Like when you first started reading it and stylistically, you had to talk to the showrunners and the people that were creating this, and how was it first presented to you? And what were your first impressions from a costume design perspective on what you were going to do?
I think when we first started it, we're like, okay, there is, the first season is very uniform heavy for the most part. Like we don't get out the kitchen much. And in the pilot, we didn't get out the kitchen at all, except for with Carmi. But there was something fun and challenging that we got out of it, because even though there's a uniform, when people they will put their own personal spin on a uniform.
Right.
My favorite thing in the world is watching the USPS and UPS people like wearing the crap out of their uniforms. Like, so there was something. Listen,
I love that. I love that. Oh my God. I think you've now just changed my worldview. Amazon delivery people, UPS delivery people. Now I'm going to start paying attention to a whole new part of the world.
It's and especially they just turn it. I have to compliment them sometimes. And I'm like, this is whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
That's awesome.
So I do think there was a creative challenge, but it was a fun challenge to figure out what people were trying to say and how they put their own personal touch to their uniforms. And reading the script, we're like, okay, like we can see the pacing, we can see it's like very cool, but like until you're seeing it being filmed and you're seeing the rhythm of how you're like, oh, this is cool, like this is awesome.
Right.
And we were on one of the bridges filming the bear, like Carmi approached the bear in the cage, and they had shut down one of the bridges, and we're like, this feels, it always felt special, but I don't think any of us could have predicted how people were going to react to it. So that even though we knew we had something special, I think that it was definitely blew us away with how many people thought it was special.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, it's even when you first hear about it, you know, it's one of those things. It's like the Matrix. You have to see it for yourself, you know. And once you do, then you're like, oh, I'm in. Now, let me ask you this: for that first season, how many multiples, like when you're shooting and you're around food and fire, and how many multiples of those uniforms did you have to make for each character?
So, for the first season, I mean, I think we might have ordered either 18 or 20 of those white T-shirts for Jeremy. I think Sid, because she wore different white shirts each episode.
Yeah.
We were able to we can get away with getting 2 or 3 for her and like 2 pants. But we definitely had to make sure there was always a multiple. Especially if we know someone is cooking, it's like, even if they're in their street clothes, we're like, okay, we need a mult on this. And even though I love vintage to the point where we wanted to have Sid in this Million Woman March t-shirt. And Io really wanted to wear it. We really wanted Io to wear it. And so even though we found it in a vintage shop, I just eBayed until I found the right size and like what seemed to be the right distress level to buy it so we could use it for that.
Right. But it put you on the search. I mean, that's something you wanted to get and you got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, everyone has at least, they have quite a few. They have quite a few up there. I would say if they're in white, like their regular white shirts, we probably have like 5 to 8, depending on what they're doing.
On a show like this, I mean, how many days do you shoot? What is an episode? How many days? What's schedule?
That's really hard to say because.
Do you do block shooting and stuff like that?
I feel like some would call it block shooting,
right.
But we tend to shoot, we can shoot across the season depending on what we're doing.
Yeah.
So in one day we could be shooting across like 3 to 4 different, especially because Chris is so quick.
Yeah.
We can be doing 4 episodes.
Sure, right. That's interesting. So yeah, on a show like this, and I was going to ask you the coordination and the planning that goes into that, because when you're shooting across, I mean, obviously, when you have a set that you're in a lot, it's kind of, you have to keep track, but you can get away with doing something like that. What is it like to interface with the showrunners and the people on a TV show? How does that work? Like on a movie, you know, it's you, the director, the actors, but on a TV show, you have showrunners, the writers, the producers, and it's kind of flipped. I mean, the director's the big man on campus or the big woman on campus when you're shooting a feature film, but on TV it's different. It's inverted, sort of, because the showrunners are more important. What's it like? Are there levels of approval that you have to go through when you're working on a show like The Bear? And who do you have to show your designs for? And are you doing sketches or are you just showing clothes? How does that work? What is that process like?
Well, the bear was a different beast. This is not a pun intended. I said as soon as it came out. But
That's all good.
So Chris Store and Joanne Alcala, like, they were the showrunners, but they're also the writers, and they've also directed.
Yeah.
So it's working with them and Chris. It's a beautiful process. Chris kind of just lets me do my thing. We have meetings, like our meetings consist of me going upstairs, and I'll bring some, my ACD and my supervisor will all hang out in his office, and we're like, okay, we have these questions. What's going on? And he's like, all right, come on in. And we'll just ask the questions. He'll answer, like, logistic wise. I'm like, okay, great. What do you see for this? And sometimes he has a vision. A lot of times he's like, oh, that'd be cool. I'll tell him something. He's like, oh, that's cool. That sounds great. I'll just shop it, do fitting. Sometimes we'll build pieces. Sometimes I'll show him like swatches and our ideas for it, especially for building a suit or something. But honestly, he kind of just lets me go for it. He kind of just lets me go.
And well, with those Emmy nominations, clearly that's a smart choice on their part on those. But I mean,
No, go ahead.
Oh, that must be great for you from a creative standpoint. You can bring to bear everything. I mean, because of your background and everything, I'm sure that they totally trust you because you know exactly what you're doing, which is...
And it's very collaborative. It's a super collaborative environment in terms of, I like to work that way, so it's great to get in there and have conversations with Chris, with Joe, with the actors, and getting a feel for the character and talking about where we think they're at and how they're wearing their clothing and the levels they're at. It's such a fulfilling process to do that, and especially on a show like The Bear. I can't stress enough. It's such a great show to work for and work with, from cast, crew, producers, whoever. It's wonderful.
And to watch. What, from your perspective, when you're working with a great ensemble cast, too? I mean, The Bear has a great cast. What's it like for you to work with an actor, and how do you develop your rapport with actors, and how much, in terms of your choices when you're creating something for a character, is informed by an actor?
Oh, yeah. Again, like talking about the collaboration and talking about sitting down, and especially working with actors like Eben or Jamie Lee Curtis, where they're so, the love and appreciation and respect they have for the characters is so beautiful, and it's so helpful in building characters like them, who I feel like easily can turn into like a farce or something to make fun of, but you never want to like, you can laugh with them. They might feel really familiar to you, and so that might be something that could be amusing, but it's not for, you're not supposed to, we don't want to make fun of them.
Right.
And it's important to have those conversations and to make your actor feel comfortable in the clothing that they're wearing, because I think it just informs their performance and how they carry themselves, and what it's like when you get into a fitting and they're putting the clothes on the body, and then something like falls into place where their stance changes, their posture changes, and you're like, that's it.
Yeah, no, and you've also, one of the things about this show too is you've had all these kind of, I wouldn't call them crazy, but a lot of really great guest stars, that show up. Everyone from, like you said, you mentioned Jamie Lee Curtis, or Molly Ringwald, or Josh Hartnett, Olivia Colman. I mean, it's wild. And I mean, like, for you, is that crazy when you see somebody like, I've never met Jamie Lee Curtis. If I met her, I'd be like, Man, the first videotape I ever owned was Halloween in 1980. And I've watched you 100 times. You know, I've seen, and do you ever get that way? On this cast, it's so wacky that some of the people they brought in, which one of the reasons I really like the show, you just, who's going to show up next kind of a thing. And I love that. Do you ever get starstruck?
I think the show moves so fast that you don't have the chance to.
Right.
And I think for like going into the show and when we started getting in, when we had the second season, when we did Fishes,
Yeah.
and it was so many of those characters at the same time, we were fitting them basically back to back to back, and we were reaching out to them and I was having conversations. And I will say again, like Chris Storer knows how to pick them, and they are wonderful. And I look forward to the fittings because they're always a pleasure. They're
Right,
always
right.
they're always so down. And also meeting someone like Olivia Colman and like Jamie Lee Curtis, you're like, oh, you're exactly who I thought you would be, and this is amazing, and you are a legend, and you are great.
That's
Yeah.
great to hear. I mean, now let me ask you this. When a show like this, because like you say, you do the pilot, you were surprised. Hey, we got picked up. They split up a great partnership when you and your great compadre had to split up, you know. But so when you go do, what's it like? I mean, do people on production feel more pressure when a show like this hits and it becomes successful? And it becomes, not only does it become successful, it's a zeitgeist show. People are writing about it in magazines, and there's op-eds about the bear in the New York Times or whatever. Does that change the production of a show at all? Or is it business as usual?
I think it can. I think I think it can, and you try to block out the noise.
Right.
And you try, and when you first get back, you're like, oh gosh, okay. There was a lot of eyes on us, but then once you start really getting moving, it kind of just fell back into place again, where you're like, okay, yeah, let's just do it how we do. Let's the best way we know how. And because I do think it could, if you thought about it, if we had, again, thankfully our production schedule and the way we move is very, so you don't even have a chance to feel you just literally have to go for it.
Have you got Tommy Hilfiger going, hey, intern, can you get my clothes? Get my clothes on your show?
Not yet,
But that's another thing. I mean, branding, a lot of the time, do you make partnerships with companies to get, are there people that come to you and say, I would like to place some of my product on your show? Or are there companies that you like to work with?
That definitely happens and has happened. It's funny because when you first ask, we usually never ask for help in terms of getting clothes from companies when we first start, mostly because we can't guarantee that we're going to feature your clothing.
Right.
So it's more of a situation where I would rather outright buy the clothing, shop for the clothing, and if I need multiples or if I need to find a specific item, then we'll reach out to be like, we're really looking for this. Can you help us out, or can you source this for us? Mostly just to bypass the fact that there's a lot more pressure to be like, oh, is this being featured? Can we see this? And I hate to say that, oh, I'm sorry, you can give this to me, but if it's not right for the character, it won't make it out of the room. Or
right, sure.
Simply might get to it during the run of show.
Yeah. Now, do you prefer, I mean, obviously you can buy off the rack because it's set in the real world and all that, but do you prefer to design your own stuff? Or how does it work when you're not working on a fantasy show or a horror movie or something that's period, when it's contemporary? Is that easier for you as a costume designer, or does it make more of a creative challenge for you to find something gratifying that you can actually sink your teeth into, as opposed to just like going to the store and buying something?
It's a little bit of both. I really enjoy using smaller companies and vintage, secondhand, because it's already lived a life and there's
Yeah.
some interest to it. So that when I can get away with it, it'll be vintage.
Right.
Or it'll be, or it'll be like a smaller brand or company. But and then when we need to, of course, and it depends on if I'm finding it or not. If I'm not finding it, we're just gonna build it. We were, for this past season, was looking for like the right brown suit for Joel McHale's character, and we're just like, we're just gonna make it. We know a great suit maker, and he's brilliant. I was like, let's just get him, and let's just we do that. Or for Carmi's chef jacket, his chef jacket is just something that me and our in-house tailor created, and we're just adding things to things that we might have already had or bought. And so I like a mix. I wouldn't say one is more preferable than the other. I do like the hunt of clothes, but if I'm not finding something, I'll just
Right. That's cool. I mean, that's now you guys, Emmy nomination. What's that like? Getting recognized for the work that everybody's doing.
Oh, I mean, it's very surreal. It's very validating in that we work very hard, and to see the cast and crew all receive these nods and acknowledgments are just, I am so so beyond happy, from just production design and HMU, and it's just, I'm thrilled for them, and it feels really good. It feels good for my team and my department. I remember my wardrobe supervisor called me and Lariana Santiago, my assistant costume designer, and he's like, I just wanted to congratulate you two for your nomination. This is big. I was like, great, you're nominated. You didn't see your name there? And he's like, what? And he's like, me? I was like, yeah, your name. I put your name. You guys helped this show. And
Wow.
It was, he was so, I'm so happy that he got to and gets to experience that too.
That was very cool of you. That's an amazing, it's, that's one of the things that can never be stressed enough about the entertainment business, is just how collaborative it is. And I think one of the things about The Bear as a show is you can see that collaboration. I mean, on every level, from the writing, the showrunners, the writing on down, the acting, the design, it all works. And I always talk about, my favorite word is verisimilitude. That quality of being real. And there's 100,000 decisions that go into creating what looks like effortless reality. But on a show, it's all fake. Everything is fake. The whole thing's fake. And people don't understand how difficult it is to make you believe. And The Bear is a show that from the get made you believe. I mean, and it was a show that I didn't expect to, like, some guy's going to come back and move back home and start a restaurant or take over his family business. How compelling can that be? Well,
wow.
Tune in next week, and it's a fantastic show. And I think your guys' work on it is really great. And congratulations on the accolades and the nods for it. So, and I'm glad we got to talk a little bit about it. But before I let you go, we always ask people, and that's why I like to delve into the past, but what advice can you give to anybody that wants to get into this? I mean, we have looming AI in front of us, but actors are always going to need to be dressed. And there's always going to be fashion. Fashion isn't going away. It might be one of the great jobs to get into, because people are always going to need clothes. And they're always going to need other human beings to design them, which is great. But what advice can you give people that might want to pursue a career in fashion or pursue a career in the arts in terms of designing clothes, and whether or not you want to go into fashion or whether you want to go into film and television? What might you tell the next generation?
Be a sponge, have patience, and take your time. You don't have to be the wonderkind. You don't have to be successful right away. If you're learning and if you're constantly growing, that will help you and continue to help you throughout your career. And watch real people, not just fashion shows, not just like glossy magazines. One thing that I continue to do, that me and Christina started when we did High Maintenance, was we had a shared album called High Maintenance on the Street. And we would just like have pictures of people we spotted, and they could be someone's abuela, they could be again, the UPS guy, they could be this really willowy model walking out, but just noticing people and how they're wearing things and how the color difference and the textures. And yeah, I would just say watch.
I think that's great advice. And now what about, would you stress getting the kind of education you had and internships and look, I love your Tommy Hilfiger story. I love that you took your shot, and you have to be the kind of person that can go up and impress somebody. Obviously, in the first place, you can't just go, oh, hello, but you did that. I mean, and I think having those kinds of experiences and learning all that you can is important too. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, 100%. I think that putting yourself out there and being vulnerable enough to do it, but respectful enough of that person's time to introduce yourself and say hello, and that you're interested in, and not necessarily, you don't have to necessarily expect something back, but the fact that now they see you and you don't know where that can lead you, whether you send that email or DM or just approach someone, that's all very important. And I also think that I don't necessarily think that going to university, going to college is the end all be all.
Right.
It helped me. For me, I loved it. I loved the structure. I loved learning about different aspects of education in the world and of art, and that was important for me. And it might not be important for someone else, but if that's the case, then it is interning, it is reaching out, it is, I think you do have to, it is creating that network. Because I will say, going to Syracuse did help have that level of getting to meet someone. Yeah.
Sure. Well, do you have anything coming up?
I am currently working on an Amazon series called The Runarounds.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And
And what about socials? Are you on Instagram? Can people find you?
I am C Wheels.
All right. Well, listen, Courtney Wheeler, I have loved this conversation. I can't thank you enough for coming on to the Designing Hollywood show, and congratulations on all the work that you've done, and specifically the work you've done on The Bear. What a great show. You guys are killing it out there, and congratulations on your whole team for the Emmy nomination.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure talking to you.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the Designing Hollywood show, and as always, we can't wait to have you on again to talk about what you're doing in the future.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much. A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from the John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, tune into the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at Post Geek Singularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.